What is happening at UNLV, Bruce Feldman?
So
what is happening?
There's actually, it's like the epicenter of the college sports world right now.
And because I've never seen this.
Well, there's two things that are going on. One is related to, and this is the old story because it's been going on for like largely the last 48 hours, is UNLV is in play for the Pac-12 and also the Mountain West and conference realignment. That's now old news. I mean, it's still going on, but it's really, UNLV is 3-0. Their starting quarterback, Matthew Sluka, had a really good career in FCS at Holy Cross, transferred, more of a running quarterback than a passing quarterback. But again, they're 3-0. Mm-hmm.
They beat Kansas. They beat Houston, right?
Yeah, 2 Big 12 wins, pretty handily. And they are sitting there. Yesterday, word starts to circulate that he is going to basically opt out and won't be playing the rest of the season. Now, from what I had heard initially was that he wanted to take this year as a redshirt where you're allowed 4 games and then could get more money someplace else and go on the market for 2025 season. But then this morning, after he puts out a statement, I think a lot of people are going, this kid quit on the team and everything like that. His dad spoke to multiple outlets and said, okay, well, he was supposed to get $100,000. He's not getting anything close to that. Let's talk about like whether it was a verbal agreement as opposed to a written contract. And this is where everything gets really murky in the NIL space. And I think we talked about this at some point. I know this is
no question we've talked about that.
Like last, I don't know, probably like 5 months ago, The Athletic, we did a big story where we talked to agents and players and coaches and everybody involved in the process and collectives. And one of the things one of the players who's now in the NFL had told me was when it comes to money, what's happening a lot, and I'm not saying it's happening in every case, is a player may think they're getting $1 million deal. It's cryptic in this regard because this player explained, he was like, yeah, you may have access to a car that's worth $100,000. You don't own it. You have it for like 4 months. You may have access to a $750,000 home, but you don't own it. You know, so it's like the value you think you're getting is $1 million, but it may not be. Now, I'm not saying it's going on in this case with Sluka, but what is interesting is if you or I did a deal and it was a verbal agreement, like, I don't know, then it's going to be interesting to see what was signed and what wasn't. And I'm not saying that the school is, because again, it's all this third party stuff. You get in this area where it's not supposed to be pay for play, but it actually always is.
You're referring to collectives and things.
I'm referring to how NIL is structured in a lot of ways right now. What the contracts are, who's involved in the negotiations. It's a real, like, very unwieldy setup right now. People want the NCAA to be involved more, but the NCAA is like kind of boxed in right now with a lot of court cases and what judges are ruling.
Yeah, I mean, I've never seen before somebody issuing a farewell thank you meme, right after 3 games with a statement that clearly 100% lays out this is over money. Mm-hmm. And we can sit here and say kid's quitting on his team, or we can sit here and say kid got robbed. But the one thing that we can definitely say for sure is that there's no piece of paper and there's no way that this could be, I would think, unless these things are signed and filed with some form of an entity that's in charge, that short of that, we're going to see stuff like this more often. We're seeing players demanding something, otherwise they're not coming to a school. We're seeing players demand something, otherwise they're leaving school. But we've never seen it 3 games in from the starting quarterback of a team that has an opportunity to play in the college football playoffs if they keep on winning. Right. Never seen that before. And it's really jarring to me, man. I'm not going to lie. And it makes me sit here saying, who's going to be the adult in the room? Is it Sankey? I know Sankey and Petiti already are having conversations in what their working group. We're talking, like, We got to get past working groups here, man.
But it's really hard for them to kind of rein this in because I think you have different jurisdictions, you have different, court cases that are coming up that are kind of boxing them in.
When you're talking about whether players are being paid, the talent fee that Tennessee's putting on its tickets to pay in advance of having to pay all athletes.
Well, you're having these third-party groups that are involved, and I think that, again, it's different than what happens in the NFL or the NBA or Major League Baseball.
Can you describe what you're describing as a third-party person who might, somebody out there, you're talking about agents,
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely could be agents who get involved in the process. They may not be, some may not be certified, many you hear aren't. And then... Like, I know of a specific situation of a very highly ranked recruit who was supposed to get $1 million, got maybe 20% of that last year. Now, from what I told the school's point was this player didn't live up to their end of the bargain. Now, what does that mean? That they didn't do the things that were mandated in the contract to get that money, or they just weren't that as good as expected on the field?
Is there a contract? Are there contracts?
I think there are contracts. I don't know the specifics on this one because right now, we've heard from a secondhand account from what we think is the UNLV side initially, and we've also heard now from an agent representing the quarterback and the quarterback's dad. Mm-hmm. But at this point, I think it's one of those things where everybody's going to look bad in it. At this point.
Yeah, I mean, because the quarterback would rather stand on whatever principle. We don't know what standing he has on and what principle, referring to money, has been offered and paid or anything like that. The father has said it, and there are teammates who might be looking at him saying, "Where are you going?" But that said, if he was promised this money and it is in a contract somewhere, then why? I don't know why the recourse is to leave and say I'm doing this now before my eligibility is up, and thus going to make myself available
market
to
again.
Highest bidder. So a school would be hiring the kid, because let's call it what it is, right. Hiring the kid to play college football for them in 2025, and I would imagine they would have to. Make sure that they're honoring their word, although his red shirt would be gone. I mean, how many times can this kid redshirt? Can he just redshirt until he's 40?
I think this would be the last year of eligibility because I think he was the starter at Holy Cross for 3 years to begin with.
Again, I know a lot of folks might be like, why are we discussing something that involves a school that's not, say, Georgia and Alabama? They're playing each other this week. That's big, and we'll get to that in a second. But this, to me, is like the total canary in a coal mine here. Like if I'm a school administrator, if I'm a coach, if I'm a dad, if I'm an agent, if I'm anybody, I'm a player, I'm going to want some rules. Like can we get the rules done? So if there is a contract, it is filed with some central office somewhere, and that central office now going to handle this dispute, and this doesn't happen. I think one of the things that was interesting about this is, years ago, I remembered when NIL first started, and it's hard to say years ago because it's not that long ago, but one of the coaches I know is a head coach, and he said, okay, well, we'll be able to get all this documentation on who's paying what and what these budgets are, because they thought it would be something that would be in the spirit of transparency, and it's actually not worked out that way at all. Because somebody, I think it was their compliance person, said, "Oh yeah, and this is a school with not a huge NIL operation, but it's still a major college program," and it was like, "Oh yeah, this is how this is going to work," and it's not worked that way. I mean, I think towards your point about it's UNLV, it's not an SEC program or Big Ten program. There's a lot of stories underneath the surface that you hear about. Where there's a lot of head-scratching things that go on. They just don't get put out there in the major spotlight by the parties involved as this one did. Because I had a conversation with a coach at a big program like a week ago where he was telling me something about they had a transfer who was pretty high profile who left, and he was like, this guy I think owes like $70,000 or in taxes on some of this stuff. And there was a lot of things that were like, I have no idea what's going on with this, because it's like once the player leaves.
It's like because all of this third party stuff, it's very interesting how not just unregulated, but just how unwieldy so much of it is. And I think there's so many stories that are like 1 degree from getting out there. But they don't usually.
And what are these stories that we're hearing about of players are suing for back NIL? Like, you know,
oh, you mean like Reggie
or Braylon Edwards and I believe Denard Robinson?
Yeah, the Reggie case is super interesting.
What is that about? Like, is it similar to Dan Marino suing the Dolphins, wanting more money because of how much Tua just made? I mean, is that the similar standing?
I don't know, because obviously I'm not a lawyer and I'm not familiar with that case. The part to me that's really interesting on Reggie Bush, you know, obviously he was a legendary player at USC. I mean, they just reconcile with him publicly as it relates to the Heisman and the NCAA, and he's suing the school. And I'm like, man, this is really interesting how this like subplot of this relates with Reggie and USC. I don't know how these things are going to play out. Again, like I don't know if people are getting bad advice from lawyers. I don't know.
Nobody knows anything. You know, nobody knows what the Supreme Court decision is going to actually rule and how paying everybody and how that affects all athletic departments. So you might as well hedge your bet and just start putting a talent fee on tickets like Tennessee's doing. And what's going on with UNLV right now, it's nuts, man. Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku Channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.